Who remembers this crew?
It's perfect over here.
Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Serena Williams, Maria Sharapova. They were the face of Nike's tennis division, Nike Court, in the mid-early 2000s. This photo is from an exhibition event before the 2015 US Open, a time when Nike reigned supreme in pro tennis, churning out custom kits for their superstar roster and dropping the sharpest tennis shoes on the market.
It's brand new and it's so well thought through, so I think there's the key components that make the shoe the best right now in the business, I think.
Serena and Maria appeared in flashy campaigns. Roger and Rafa literally had Nike stamped on their forehead as they won title after title after title. If you wanted to play like Roger, a common first step was to wear what Roger was wearing. He'd been signed with Nike since 1994. At just 13 years old, Nike's marketing reps spotted Roger's appeal early. He'd be the tennis division's golden child for over 2 decades. But less than 4 years after this photo was taken, 3 out of these 4 superstars would experience career-changing moments that caused Nike to divest from tennis. Serena left the game for over a year to have a baby, Maria's career was rocked by a doping scandal, and Roger would part ways with Nike entirely. This opened the door for a new IT logo in tennis, and while no brand has come close to Nike Court's influence in the early 2000s, one brand in particular is experiencing huge growth and standing out in a crowded market: On Running, a brand that started in Switzerland making shoes. With the help of Roger Federer, they're currently making waves in tennis apparel. They're the head-to-toe sponsor for the best women's tennis player on the planet, Iga Swiatek, and one of the most engaging and popular American men on tour, Ben Shelton. In addition to that, they've harnessed Roger Federer's brand to promote their innovative and high-tech shoes.
I like the shoe a lot. We wanted to make it very lightweight.
A future
Hopefully
classic.
a future classic. This is the goal, of course.
On's apparel is fresh, their colorways are unique and eye-catching, and the company's revenue is through the roof.
Please welcome On to highlight their initial public offering.
They've invested big in tennis, and their unconventional marketing techniques have fostered brand loyalty that creates a cult following integral to sparking buzz around a growing brand. This is how Roger Federer is making On Running the coolest brand in tennis. Roger Federer. He's the man synonymous with men's tennis in the early mid-2000s. He's stylish, well-spoken, elegant, a family man, a philanthropist, and he's very, very, very good at tennis.
Federer turns it up to 11.
If you could 3D print a brand ambassador for high-end goods, a Swiss tennis player named Roger, who looks like this, and talks like this,
Même si je suis en costard cravate et pas en training, mais...
and dresses like this, is pretty much exactly what you'd end up with. He has deals with Rolex, Mercedes-Benz, Moet, Lindt, Wilson, Oliver Peoples. He has a foundation and surpassed $1 billion in career earnings before retiring from pro tennis. His brand is undeniable, his personality is impossible to dislike, and his business instincts have helped him transcend the sport in a way only a few tennis players are able to do. A large part of that business success comes from his likability and the way he makes other people feel. Max Eisenbud, a sports agent at IMG, said about Roger Federer, "He's just so good if you've seen him with sponsors, with CEOs. He just has the ability to make you feel like he really cares what you were saying, and he has time for you. I think it's genuine, and I've never seen another athlete like that." One of his best-known attributes is his style. He was named GQ's most stylish man of the decade, and that stylish moniker set Roger up to make millions after he hung up his rackets for good. During the majority of his career, Roger was signed with Nike for a head-to-toe apparel deal. And in the final 10 years of this deal, Roger was pulling in around 10 to 12 million a year from Nike. And then came 2018, the year that Nike fumbled Roger, ultimately making Federer way richer, if you can believe it. Roger had just won the 2018 Australian Open and his Nike deal was up for renewal. But remember, Nike's superstar roster had dwindled. Serena and Maria were out of the spotlight and Nike was about to let one of their biggest assets slip away. We're not sure what the conversation was with Nike, we just know it ended with Roger leaving the brand. According to Nike tennis director Mike Nakajima, a rule of thumb at Nike was to not spend more than 10% of revenue on athlete sponsorship. At the time, revenue for the tennis division was around $350 million, meaning they didn't want to spend more than $35 million on sponsorships. With Serena, Maria, and Rafa still on the roster, in addition to a new wave of Nike athletes coming up, they were likely at or above that 10% number. There is another theory as to why Roger's deal fell through, but I'll get to that in a minute. With Nike out, Roger signed an apparel deal with Japanese brand Uniqlo worth $300 million over 10 years. Now Roger had an apparel deal, but what about shoes? When he left Nike, Roger found himself at a crossroads. He could either stay unsponsored below the knees and wear whatever shoes he wanted, or he could pick a brand. I mean, he was Roger Federer after all, and pretty much any brand would be lucky to have him. During his time home in Switzerland, Roger had noticed his friends wearing On running shoes. He tried on a pair and liked them, and that led him to connecting with their founders. Now here he is on the Business of Fashion podcast, talking about the decision to seek out On running in 2018.
I mean, I think it happened quite organically and naturally. There is this shoe company, sneaker company here in Switzerland, you know, on running. I heard about that their market share was about 45% here in Switzerland. I saw it also growing much more worldwide. And I said, with Tony, you know, like, how about if we meet these guys and just have a conversation, and out of curiosity and interest, let's just get to know each other.
That meeting would lead to a deal being signed at the end of 2019. Roger wanted something more than a simple pay-to-play deal, meaning he wanted involvement in the brand. He didn't want to merely be cut a check to wear the clothes. He wanted in, or he wanted on. So I think this preference is a reason why the Nike deal fell through. Roger was approaching the end of his pro career and wanted a beefier deal after retirement, something with leverage. I don't think Nike was willing to create a Roger shoe in the same way On was. Eliza Wascoat actually did a great rundown of Nike's retreat from tennis for courts. I'd recommend reading that for a deeper dive on this subject. In recent years, Nike has dropped quite a few tennis players from their roster, a move that was preceded by their decision to pull back from marketing Nike Court. Nike also ended their 27-year relationship with Tiger Woods earlier this year, further indication of the brand's move to streamline operations. Now this is further evidence of their reluctance to pour money into marketing a signature tennis shoe, even if it was Roger Federer. In addition to the partnership deal with On, Roger invested an undisclosed sum at an undisclosed valuation. In the end, he'd wind up with a 3% stake in the company. This deal would get the ball rolling on his signature shoe,
The Roger. It's
is
very
so light.
Exactly, it's super comfortable.
Initially, the Roger was a lifestyle shoe, not a tennis shoe. Tennis was new territory for On running. They were well-versed in creating shoes meant for running, forward movement, not super high intensity, lightweight. A tennis shoe is a completely different beast. Tennis shoes are built for explosive side-to-side movement. They have to fit perfectly, provide added stability through the ankle, and be sturdy enough to last on gritty hard courts. A tennis shoe from scratch would take almost 2 years to engineer and design, and On had no experience in tennis. So, a brief history, the company was founded in 2010 by Olivier Bernhard, David Alman, and Casper Capetti in Zurich, Switzerland. Olivier was an avid runner. David and Casper were more business savvy. Their growth was stimulated by a number of angel investors early on. Then they won the Gold Award at a huge sports exhibition in Munich. That award gave them more exposure and notoriety. A few years later, a famous Swiss athlete wore On running shoes at the Rio Olympics. Pretty soon, they were a buzzy new brand with a growing reputation.
The Cloud is still a very young shoe. It's been born 3 years ago, but already millions of runners have embraced it. So really time will tell whether it will become an icon.
Now normally an emerging brand would lean into what's known as DTC, or direct-to-consumer sales. This basically means selling from the company website, cutting out a middleman like Foot Locker or Amazon or Nordstrom. But On didn't go all in on DTC. Instead, they focused on specialty running stores and branded fun runs to find their target audience, loyal and avid runners. The reasoning behind this was that On wanted people to see their shoe next to the competitors. The CloudTech sole was eye-catching. Sales reps could inform runners on the technology and hopefully initiate a brand switch, something really hard to do in the running community. Specialty retail also ensured a high purchase intent. Usually people who walked into specialty running stores weren't there to browse, they were there to buy. And it's this strategy, one that focused on educating the buyer on exactly what the shoe does for them, that spilled over into their DTC sales. Their website is focused on educating the user, an up-close look at what the shoe is, what it does, and why it works. They're heavy on engineering and innovation, something Nike was known for in their early years. By focusing on the technology and not overextending themselves, On Running maintained a niche image, a cult following, and their brand wasn't diluted, which is why Roger Federer kind of spooked the founders initially. He was bigger than the brand. They weren't sure they could keep up with the demand Roger would create for On Running. On had prioritized focusing on the running community, not using a big flashy name to boost sales. But this was a golden opportunity. They were big in European markets and had made inroads in America, but Roger could help them take the brand to the next level. So instead of On paying Roger to wear their shoes, Roger paid On for a stake in the company in 2019. And the timing was perfect because over the next few years, running, tennis, and pickleball exploded. People were buying workout gear and going on runs, going to the tennis courts, playing socially distant racket sports, and pretty soon brands like Sporty & Rich, Kith, and Tyler the Creator's LaFleur were releasing tennis capsule collections with Wilson and Lacoste. The early 2020s was the perfect time to break into tennis, and On Running had the perfect man to carry their torch. They announced their partnership with Roger in New York City by hosting a group run in Central Park. Roger stopped by Good Morning America, a commercial was released, the whole 9 yards. Roger's presence with On began with the launch of the Roger, a lifestyle sneaker that made its debut in July 2020. This shoe would be the first in what would become the Roger Collection, a line that includes the Roger Advantage, the Roger Center Court, the Clubhouse, the Spin, and the Roger Clubhouse Mid. On would release the Roger Pro, their first ever tennis performance shoe, in 2021. This shoe was designed specifically for Roger Federer to wear on court.
I gave them a lot of feedback as much as I could with all my experience that I've had.
A good shoe, but requires very precise footwork to master, and in all honesty, it didn't receive widespread praise from everyday tennis players. Then in 2023, On's biggest move into pro tennis to date. They signed Iga Swiatek and Ben Shelton for head-to-toe apparel deals. Iga was the world #1 and most dominant player in women's tennis in years. Ben Shelton burst onto the scene at the 2023 Australian Open. He was signed with Roger Federer's agency Team 8, and I don't doubt that Roger's connection with the agency helped broker Ben's deal with On. Ben was newer to the tour, but signing an American was important for On. 60% of their revenue came from North America in 2022, and it made sense to sign someone from that market. Iga and Ben were standouts in the next wave of pro tennis players. After signing with On in March of 2023, Iga and Ben sported unique, minimalist kits from On Running during their matches. No other tennis brand was experimenting with On's colorways of black and hot pink at that time. Their asymmetrical designs were eye-catching, and they marked a new player in tennis apparel. And we'd see Roger hanging out with Ben Shelton and Iga over the next year, either casually or at planned events like this one in New York City ahead of the 2023 US Open. The Roger Pro 2 dropped in early 2024 with an updated price and build, focusing on the next wave of tennis players wearing On sneakers, namely Ben Shelton and Iga Swiatek. The Roger Pro 2 featured a rebuilt upper with reinforced mesh, a molded heel, a herringbone outsole for enhanced agility and grip, and that iconic carbon fiber speedboard plate for support and responsiveness when moving around the court. Based on what I've read, the Roger Pro 2 was a massive improvement from their first model. More support, more stability, sleeker, and better all around for most tennis players. Since signing Ben and Iga, On Running has also announced deals with tennis players Yao Fonseca, Flavio Caboli, Yeri Hong, Reda Benani, and Julius Dusek. All of these athletes, except for Caboli, are under 18, signaling an effort by On to get the jump on young talent, just like Nike did with Roger. And most recently, On Running signed Zendaya. If there was any indication that On Running had gone mainstream, it was this one. Zendaya is one of the biggest celebrities on the planet with hundreds of millions of followers on social media. And On played on her role as tennis player Tashi Duncan in Challengers in a recent ad, pitting her against Roger Federer for some air tennis. My personal theory, I don't think On Running would have signed Zendaya had it not been for Roger Federer. She had just done a movie about tennis, appeared at tennis tournaments over the past year, and clearly was making an effort to appeal to the tennis community. That may have led her to On Running, as they were also making inroads into tennis, which was a journey led by Federer himself. Zendaya could have signed with Adidas or Nike, but she chose On, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So there's this book I came across recently called The Roger Federer Effect by Simon Chambers and Simon Graff. And the book explores Roger's influence on the people around him through a series of interviews. The Roger Federer Effect illustrates just how powerful Roger's legacy and brand is. During the last 20 years, Roger went from a great tennis player to a trademark. He's distinguished himself from his peers by treating people well and approaching life with a sense of ease.
Thank you.
When you playing?
Last song for two.
Okay. Play well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You got that on camera.
And yes, capitalism and the commercialization of success has made Roger very, very rich. His billion-dollar brand wasn't built by just being nice, but people trust Roger's endorsement in large part because he is nice. He's credible. And someone who's generous and outgoing isn't pegged as a scammer or a con artist. Those intangibles are what makes Roger Federer so valuable to a brand like On Running. We want to be like Roger, wear what Roger wears. His brand is aspirational. In marketing, there's a saying, "I'll see it when I believe it." A twist on the phrase, "I'll believe it when I see it." Selling an innovative product, as On Running has set out to do, comes when you change how people think about that product. Shifting mental models is very difficult, and to do so, you have to capture people's attention. On first did it by targeting specialty retail, then by leaning into a trusted voice like Roger Federer to sell their innovation. That led to a boom in sales. Stock prices are through the roof, and On's visibility grows with each passing month. Now On Running is venturing into tennis, and I don't know if their innovation is going to replicate Nike's. I don't know if On will fizzle out, but it's clear that the Roger Federer effect has contributed to On Running's massive growth.